You're listening to Feel Good Astrology with Louisa Tanner Munson. To request a personal reading with Louisa, go to www.feelgoodastrology.com.
Hi, it's Louisa Tanner Munson from feelgoodastrology.com, and I'd like to welcome you to this podcast about the North Node in the second house of our birth charts, and also what might happen should the North Node be transiting through your second house. So it's a podcast of two parts, really, and in previous podcasts about the North Node, I've gone to quite a few lengths to really appreciate the relationship between the North and South Node. To understand the North Node, you really do need to consider the position of the South Node, which is completely opposite. You know, looking at just one or the other of them isn't enough. They're read in partnership. So what is the North Node? The North Node is the path to karma. It describes the kind of karma that we have in our life, the things that we struggle with, the things we find difficult to achieve and maintain. It's like the theme for our life, and it really describes why we encounter the same kind of problems again and again and again. So it's a very useful point. The South Node shows where we're coming from, and the karma involved in that. So it describes what we've already achieved, what we've already maintained. It describes levels of unconscious competence, you know those kind of skills that you just naturally do very easily, that no one can quite fathom out. It's a bit like magic. So the South Node really shows where we have that level of unconscious competence, where things come very naturally to us. And I guess if you have a view of the world that involves past lives, and the kind of context of reincarnation, then the North and South Node really do make some sense, because, you know, at one level you are in a place of understanding where the South Node has described your old lives, your past lives. You know, it describes where you've been working, what kind of karma you've been working through all these past lifetimes. And the North Node shows where you're going in this lifetime and also in subsequent lifetimes. So it's like a cosmic compass, I guess, showing you your North and South. So yeah, that's very useful. Now, if you don't have the same kind of mindset that has a belief in past lives, then you might just want to consider that the South Node represents your innate skill set that you're born with, and it might also describe a little bit about your past and your childhood and the kind of skill sets around you that you've learnt from your parents. And the North Node is showing where you're going and how you're moving out and beyond through there. Now, this podcast is also not just about the North Node, but it's about the second house. And a bit like the North Node, you know, that you can't really fully understand it without reading the South Node. You have to work with both opposites. It's the same with the house system as well. So the second house is in opposition to the 8th house in astrology. So it's really important for us to look at the axis of values and value systems, because that's, I think, the key word to understanding both the second and the 8th. So if I just start with the 8th, the 8th house really shows all those things that are slightly secretive to us, to do with values, and it really describes the subjects that we're a little bit too embarrassed to talk about when we first meet somebody new. So, for instance, have a think about what subjects do you usually go, can't say that. It might be sex. Giving birth, ill health, dying, your earnings or your partner's earnings, your financial portfolio, inheritances, family ancestral secrets. You know, they're all captured in the house of birth, death and taxes, which is the 8th house. It also looks at loans and money opportunities. Any kind of resources that you share with other people are covered by the 8th house. So it's about value systems and your attitudes towards them that have to do with other people. So for instance, sex and sexual preferences, it's not about just your individual sexual preferences, it's about the sexual preferences that you share with other people, if that makes sense. And like when you give birth to somebody else. When you die, you're transitioning from one place to another, but death doesn't really affect the person because you die, but it affects everyone around you, if you know what I mean. So the 8th house is really about value systems that you share with other people and that you might be a bit secretive about. So birth, death and taxes really does kind of capture it, really, because you pay your taxes to somebody else, don't you? So that's kind of the 8th house. It also shows transitions. It's a place of transformation. So it looks at you transitioning from one stage of life to another, like birth. Once upon a time we were all in a birth canal in a womb, and we came out and we transitioned out. And it's just a bit like, going from child to teenager, from teenager to adult, from adult, and it's a bit like going through the menopause and going through old age, going through a disease and then dying. Not that you have to die via a disease, but it describes all of those different stages of life as well. The 2nd house then is the opposite. It's the value systems and resources that you bring in yourself, which seems really a lot easier to understand. Lots of astrologers, especially if you look at horoscope astrology, lots of people will talk about it's the place of your money and your earnings and your attitudes to your earnings, etc., etc. I can really respond to that, and yeah, I can see that earnings do come in your 2nd house. That said, I think that's selling the 2nd house a little too short. I really do. Because the 2nd house is traditionally ruled by the sign of Taurus. The 8th house is ruled by Scorpio, by the way, if you hadn't already guessed, because Scorpio captures all of those qualities, the sex and the birth, death, and secrets, and transformation. But the 2nd house is ruled traditionally by Taurus, and Taurus isn't just about your money. Taurus is also about resources, which captures all kinds of things that help us. So it's not just about money. I think it's a really one-sided way of assessing our worth and value. So I think the 2nd house also shows how resourceful we are, the kinds of resources that we might have at our disposal. So for instance, somebody with quite a busy 2nd house might be a very resourceful person with lots of resources at their fingertips. And it might not always be money. It might be that they have high levels of friendship resources, or have an interest in homesteading, for instance, like being off the electricity grid, saving their water, composting. There's loads of different ways of finding resources, like swapping clothes and sharing, recycling, upcycling. There's so many different things. So it's not just about money, but obviously earnings do come under the 2nd house. The other thing that I would make absolutely abundantly clear about the 2nd house is it's about values and how we value ourselves. So it's important that we don't forget that, because if you've got quite a few planets in the 2nd house, then their relationships to the other planets that they make aspects to will describe your self-esteem and how much self-love you might have and how much value you ascribe to yourself. So it's pretty key stuff, really. And of course, Taurus as a sign is about our survival and security as well. So these values that we have we got the right values and resources in place to survive? I think that is absolutely key. We don't just survive because we have earnings. We survive because we have the wits and the resources to do it. So I just wanted to make that really clear, because it doesn't always come across in traditional sort of horoscope astrology. And those issues are very pertinent at the moment, seeing as Uranus has been on the cusp of going into Taurus. It's been in Taurus, it's come back, it's about to go back into Taurus in 2019 as well. And that's all to do with resources and revaluing things. So with the North Node in the second house then, your main drive in life is understanding your relationship to resources and earnings and self-value, which is a huge thing, because we're educated to believe that we are the value of our earnings. And what a ridiculous thought that is. But irrespective of that, people still find that their self-esteem is, and their status in life is determined by their earnings, how much money they've got in the bank, etc., and not about who they are as a person. So one of the challenges with a second house North Node is understanding our value from a much broader and greater perspective, because it's not just about money. And if your North Node in the second house does have some hard aspects to it, then your attitudes towards money are probably going to be quite up and down. Or if you've got planets attached, like conjunct to your North Node in the second house, that's also going to affect your ability to earn money, but also affect your ability to use money and save money and keep money, or just to share money. But it really, really does just sort of encapsulate our value systems about ourselves. Have you noticed yet that my North Node is in the second house? I'm going on a lot about it, aren't I? And if you want to know more about my North Node, I've done a separate podcast which shares how I interpret it in my own chart. I think I'm only just coming to terms with my North Node, and that is the thing about the North Node, is it's a lifelong description of our karmic challenges in this lifetime, and mine is definitely about valuing. If you do want to sort of understand how the North Node comes to play in our charts, then have a listen into that one as well. Now, if you've got the North Node going through your second house, then you are coming to a time of re-evaluating your life. And so over the next 18 months, you are going through a period of reassignment, re-evaluation, possibly thinking more about how you can increase your earnings, but also make your earning potential more fail-safe. So you will be thinking about other ways of securing your future. And it's quite an exciting time, actually, if you think about it as an 18-month project rather than a lifetime's project. If your North Node is currently going through the second house, it means it has recently been in your third house, which has brought you back into your community. It's brought you back into articulating yourself, and possibly volunteering, possibly sharing information as a teacher, being very flat in a hierarchical sense. So it has really taken away any pretensions, and has eased off some of the sharp corners of our ego, which would have been very, very fortuitous. So it makes sense that after that 18-month period, you're coming up to a time where you're reassessing and reevaluating who you are and your value in life. So I think that's quite a useful transit. Also, if you are currently experiencing a transit of a second house North Node, it also means that the South Node is in the 8th house, showing that whilst you're reevaluating yourself, you have the comfort of already having evaluated your joint accounts and your joint values and attitudes. So this is really a personal upgrade that you're going through, because everything on a joint level seems to be quite well balanced. So hopefully that's useful. If you have the second house North Node, or are going through the transits, or if any of this has made you think, shucks, I could really do with a reading, then feel free to give me to drop me a line. You can reach me at Louisa, that's Louisa, at feelgoodastrology.com. Hope to hear from you soon. Take care.
You've been listening to Feel Good Astrology with Louisa Tanner-Munson, and this recording has been made possible by all you lovely supporters at Patreon. To request a personal reading with Louisa, go to www.feelgoodastrology.com.